I think that's one of the things that gets forgotten in all of this. If I had to select an industry in the whole country that I would call an Indigenous industry, I would say it's the oil patch. I think by demographics, Indigenous people are overrepresented in the oil patch. And I think that has a lot to do with, where the jobs are, where the mines are, where the projects are, that it's often close to Indigenous land, Indigenous reserves, but also through the partnerships, allowing Indigenous people to start companies. Like you see the Mikisew, they're worth millions. But you never hear from, as we were saying before we started the interview, you never hear from Fort McKay. You just hear from the Indigenous activists in Vancouver.
Well, see, that's part of the problem when Jane Fonda came to town. At the time, Chief Jim Boucher from Fort McKay refused to meet with her because he was like, I'm not doing this with you. Second of all, in Fort McMurray, it's basically industry, and all my clients from a marketing company and all that are all Indigenous businesses. I'm an Indigenous business. We all, it's very interconnected, and it's taken a kind of interesting story. So Doug Losky, who's in the first issue of Oil and Gas World magazine, he's a very, very, very successful Indigenous businessman. And one of the things that was kind of interesting, they was telling me a story that when he had Clearwater Welding years ago, he hired a guy who, was struggling a little bit and gave him a second chance. And 20 some odd years later, he got a thank you for that, because now that guy's working at Syncrude and has turned his life around. And I think that the two things that I want to cover on this is, one, the massive successful stories when you have the Indigenous billionaires or multimillionaires that have just taken it to the next level. But also, when I was in BC, one story really hit me that I was talking to this guy, because I just finished filming Chief Crystal Smith, and he came up to me and he said, listen, I just want to tell you my story, and I wish I didn't have any battery, but it was just such a touching story. He said, I'm 55 years old and I just got my first real job, and I'm going to save enough money to put my kids through school or help them. And he wanted to work for 10 years at the Coastal GasLink. Boom. Yeah. Simple, not, he's going to, just make enough money that he can retire and I think that's the story. And then, that douchebag Mark Ruffalo, I was watching, it's kind of hard because I kind of like the concept of She-Hulk, attorney at law, which is kind of fucked.
It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous, but I kind of watched it. I was just like, and I do struggle when I don't like a celebrity, but then sometimes I'm like, you can't.
We would have nothing to watch.
I know. So it's sort of like whatever. But for him to speak about Coastal GasLink, he, it's just it's unbelievable, those actors, that they live this high life, and even if they drive an electric car and they become vegans and eat chickpeas and tofu or whatever, they're still benefiting from oil and gas. But the worst part is that he's actually hurting Indigenous jobs, because when these celebrities come and they we're here to save you, they actually don't know the damage they're done. That is the biggest thing I'm proud of with Jane Fonda. And bluntly, industry should cut me a massive check, because the amount of money that saved them. Yeah. Think of the millions of dollars in PR by standing up to Jane Fonda, when even Rachel Notley, the premier at the time, when she spoke out against the visit, when the Fort McMurray First Nation outside of just by Anzac there wrote a statement against her visit, and all of a sudden Indigenous people said no. She didn't speak on behalf of them. But that's what I'm proud of, because Jane Fonda is not going to solve Indigenous poverty. She's not going to improve economic reconciliation or the damage done by residential schools by showing up here. She's a multi-millionaire who dated or was married to a billionaire. She is part of the Mile High Club, and that's an exclusive club, and you can't be part of that club unless you use fossil fuels.
Right.
And you have to have a private jet.
Yeah.
Because maybe if you tip the WestJet person $5 or something. But that's how absurd Jane Fonda is. I'm actually being serious, which is kind of funny because but she's on Ellen talking about how she's a part of the Mile High Club, right? And joked about it and all that. But just basically, okay, you were living a life where it's immense privilege. You get to fly in a private jet with Ted Turner, and then you're coming to Fort McMurray and you're like talking about the wildfire and how you watched from LA and we were so upset, but it's all because of climate change. And if you come back like 7 years later now, all the trees are coming back. It's part of the cycle of the forest, and you understand what really went down. I think she should be ashamed of herself, because I'm not even going to fault her for her activism, but she came to McMurray with a purpose, and I'm happy that we stood up to her, and I'm happy, that's one thing that I'm very proud of, because the damage that Neil Young did was, when he called our community Hiroshima. Now we can go on Facebook and post pretty pictures of like the beautiful clear skies and the Northern Lights and all that stuff, but to combat what Neil Young did outside of our region, that's hard. Yeah. Because he damaged us, right? Same with Leo. Not so much Leo as much as Neil Young.
Oh, hey, what you just saw there is a clip from my weekly full-length show, The Gunn Show. It airs on Wednesday, but this is the internet. You can watch it whenever you feel like. You just have to become a subscriber to our paywalled premium content. Just go to rebelnewsplus.com to become a member today.